Oh, hello there. Say, the outdoors and nature sure are swell. What's that? You're supposing that exotic lands might be interesting as well? And how? I applaud your moxie, kid. Whether you're a daring dame or a fearless fella, bully to you, I say. So come along with me and I'll show you the wonders of the mighty Kilimanjaro.
Assuming you've managed to navigate the occasionally tricky methods to get to where Kilimanjaro is, the first thing you're going to do is get picked up by your guide. The government requires all the climbers of Kilimanjaro to have a Tanzanian guide with them, on top of paying for all the permits like climbing, camping, and park fees and whatnot. So since you have to hire someone anyway, companies have sprung up that provide all the paperwork plus rides, hotels, porters, cooks, and pretty much anything else for almost the same cost as just meeting minimum government requirements to climb. Makes more sense to go all out than not. Of course, before you actually ship out, the guides do a gear check to make sure all of your equipment is up to speed and you've got what you need. Anything you don't have, you can rent from whatever operator you're using. When my buddy and I went to go get picked up for the climb, we found out that another random person, a Canadian, was also coming on a whim on the last minute. So our climb would actually consist of 12 people. There was the 3 of us, plus 5 porters and a cook, and guides for each of us. Their jobs were to set up, tear down camp, cook, carry most of our gear, lead the way, and pretty much everything else. The only thing we had to do was to walk, or so we were told. Posh indeed. Once you get to the actual starting gate, you'll pass through, and there's a little tourist town there where you can get properly motivated to climb, aka have a hot cup of tea or coffee. I did have a little concern I wouldn't be engaged enough since it seemed so easy, but that worked itself out. My buddy and I chose the Machame route, which is currently the most popular route, though it's debatably the most difficult of the non-technical routes. I wanted to go in the rainy season to avoid as many other people as possible. My buddy wanted an additional day on the climb to account for the altitude since he'd never been at higher altitudes before, and he was rightly concerned of how he would react. So rather than die on a 5-day climb or be messed up from a 6-day climb, we decided and paid for a 7-day climb. We walked along this road, and the road literally becomes the path through the forest.
Jumbo! That is some skill right there. Good kung fu.
One of the most impressive feats was one of the porters was this lady who could carry a bag on her head. She carried a 20-kilogram bag. It's like a 100-liter bag. She carried it all the way up to the final camp on her head, climbing this mountain that everyone else was using trekking poles and stuff for. It was really impressive. Only saw her fall down once. Speaking of Hakuna Matata, we'll come back to that. You'll hear the phrases pole pole and Hakuna Matata a lot if you're climbing this mountain. Pole pole is Swahili for slowly, take it easy, on your own pace, and then Hakuna Matata is no worries. So many gorgeous examples of unique flora and fauna in the region traipsing through the rainforest.
Yeah, look at this. Look at this guy changing colors.
Is he?
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit.
You'll never guess what happens in the rainforest, though. It rains. Like, a lot.
Rain! Look at how happy you are.
Who would have thought rain in the rainforest?
Inconceivable.
The climb up through the rainforest is gorgeous. You get all kinds of vibrant colors and waterfalls. Even when it's raining, it's pretty. All the rain did actually cause a couple landslides, so we had to go off the beaten path to navigate around some snap trees and mud and boulders that were blocking the way, but it really wasn't anything. It's not super difficult if you're able to walk in mud. It's fine. As far as struggles go, the only one I was really concerned with was having a place to go to the bathroom that wouldn't devalue the mountain. But thankfully, there were the occasional outhouse latrines along the way. I did wind up using a super old and rickety one that was precariously perched, where every other wooden plank inside was broken. One false move, or if one of these things had broken, and you would have been plummeting into the abyss. If it didn't kill you, you definitely wish you died, because you do not want to be living through that. Speaking of having a place to go to the bathroom, on top of all the other things the porters do, you could actually pay a guy to haul a toilet up for you, so that you can just take dumps whenever and wherever you feel like it, and this guy's gonna haul it all the way up to the top and back. You know how much that costs? $10 a day. Who's doing that? We got to Camp Machame, hung out for a while, and then, ta-da! A camp sprung up. My only critique at this stage of the game was that, my clothes were wet in the bag they were carrying.
My bowl is like pre-salted.
All my clothes are pre-moistened.
Did they get wet?
Yeah, they got super wet. My clothes were in a bag inside of another bag inside of a garbage bag. It's like the porters intentionally got my clothes wet.
You want me to carry your luggage?
Yeah, I pay money, you carry the bags. Or is that too complicated?
No. I got it.
Good.
Outside of that little snafu, though, everything was great. And we were still riding high on the first full day. We saw the world's strongest rainbow just chilling out on the side of Mount Kilimanjaro. It was pretty impressive.
Follow the Bifrost to Asgard.
Then we had our meal, and my only critique about that first meal has nothing to do with the meal itself. It's that we didn't realize dinner was going to be a multi-course meal, so we filled up on all the wrong things like popcorn and gruel. I stuffed myself with gruel and bread, then made a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and then the real food came out. This happened multiple times over the course of the days because we were still trying to figure out how everything worked, but the food was actually really good, with one exception.
Okay. Okay.
Oh boy. Right. Spaghetti. That's right. Back to bed.
What, this is not your favorite?
No, you know that I hate spaghetti with a fiery passion. It's the grossest food on the planet.
It's no garlic.
Great. I can eat the bananas and the vegetables.
So with our first day in the books, we crawled up into our tent to get comfy and rest up for the rest of the climb.
Welcome to our humble home.
This is the inside of the tent.
This is where the magic happens.
Cozy.
On this side. Look at our lantern.
Well, you probably can't see it, but it's
Whatever.
there.
Take my word for it, we have a lantern. We could party all night.
We can.
Until like 8 p.m. because you got to get up early to climb.
Yes. And, yeah. I have a headache.
A random guy got a single tent, while my buddy and I had a double. The only difference between the two was how many people were crammed in there.
Alright, here we go. This is night one inside of our super nice tent.
I'm wearing pants.
Everyone's wearing pants. For now. I'm sure the random guy that was with us really hated being with us on account of... We're probably obnoxious, and this guy definitely hated everything, and so, you know, in the middle of the night I'm getting up to pee from all the tea, walking around looking like a wraith, or we're like screwing around in bed.
Party in the tent. Party in the tent.
This dude had never been hiking, climbing, camping. He was struggling. When he started, he didn't even have pants. He had to rent those, too. He just threw away thousands of dollars on a whim to climb this mountain, which, I mean, you know, you can't really throw any stones in that direction. Day 2, I was up at 5:30 for my morning exercises. We packed at 6:30, washed at 7, breakfast at 7:30, and on the road by 8. The waiter, I guess is what I'll call him, he also had the job of relaying messages to us, so he'd be like, time to get up, tea is ready, dinner is ready. But the problem is that he didn't actually speak English, and the messages weren't actually true most of the time. When he was like, time to get up, I'd be like, I'm already up, I've been up for over an hour. And he'd be like, time to get up. Like, I was up before you, I'm the first one up. Time to get up. One of the most frustrating ones was the time for dinner, because you'd go to the mess tent and nothing would show up for an hour, but if you don't go, he just keeps yelling at you that dinner is ready.
Oh, hell yeah. This lady is... You can get a good look at this lady climbing up with the basket on her head on the side of the mountain.
Day 2 is when I hit the limit for the pole pole, because they kept saying it constantly, but they rarely meant it. Take your time, no rush, let's go now! I don't like to rush. And the whole culture there seemed to be to not plan anything and rush. I don't know a single person that likes to hurry up and wait. So on day 2, we left the glades of the rainforest and we continued ascending up. It's like a steep, rocky ridge. They called it the Shira Plateau. Then it was open moorlands, and then we crossed some rivers and gorges, and then it was on to Shira 2 Camp. The second we got to Shira 2 Camp, it started raining again, which didn't bother me and my buddy, but it did bother our random guy. Everything was new and unpleasant to him. He didn't like hiking or climbing or camping or the food or the weather or music or animals. So, you know, we don't know what he hoped to get out of this, but, you know, we were keeping an eye on him, especially because he was becoming symptomatic of altitude sickness. Kept talking about headaches, dizziness, nausea, loss of appetite, difficulty breathing. So my buddy and I kept a close eye on him, because we didn't really have any reason to believe anyone else was.
Here we go. This is the second camp on the Machame route. It's great, it's November. During COVID. There's nobody here but our team. It's fantastic. We've got the entire mountain to ourselves, it seems like. And there's a toilet over there, which is incredible.
And just when I was sure they were winging everything, we were taken to a vantage point and briefed on the following day's hike. I was like, a plan, all right! Then we went back to camp for tea. There was so much tea. I mean, I love tea more than the next guy. I routinely break for tea. But this was comical in its excess. All the time with the tea. Which meant all the time with the pee. I'm fairly certain they didn't fully grasp the effects of tea. They said it was to make sure we were hydrated, but this tea's caffeinated, so it's a diuretic. It probably decreased our hydration overall. They also kept trying to force it on us before bed so we would sleep well. If your definition of sleeping well is getting up every hour to pee, then mission accomplished. Still, if my options are no tea or too much tea, I always choose the latter. Also, it makes me feel even more like a pith helmet wearing 19th century English dandy, so I'm all for it.
I say, even on the side of Kilimanjaro, there's always time for a fresh cup of tea.
I'm keeping that disappointed head shake in there.
And this is our plan of attack for day 3, skirting along this ridge, all the way out to, ta-da, the peak, or thereabouts. Day 3, like any other day, got up, did my morning exercises like I always do. Washed my face with the provided hot water from the porters, which was actually pretty nice every morning. Just getting a nice kind of clean feeling to start the day. But this is the day we started to notice that maybe we hadn't gotten the things that we had paid for.
We're on morning 3 of the trek. You can see the peak behind me.
That's where we'll end up in a couple of days. But yeah, morning 3. It's quite a bit colder than it's been. So I'm gloved up, hat, you know, puffy for the morning. And yeah, yesterday was probably the hardest day. We gained quite a bit of elevation. We're sitting at between 13,000 and 14,000 feet right now. So, you know, headaches and a little bit of nausea, but not terribly bad. But we're doing well. It's myself, Nash, and Josh, and yeah, we're doing it. It's funny because yesterday one of the porters or guides came and asked us for ibuprofen. So, you know, we gave them it, but then we realized, like, do they not have a med kit? You know, they haven't been doing pulse ox for us either, which we thought was going to be a thing every day, just to monitor. But between Nash and I, we're both, you know, wilderness, you know, first responder trained, on EMT trained, so we have the gear we need, as well as he brought a pulse ox, so I was able to do that this morning, and it was at 80, which is a bit low. But I'm thinking by tomorrow morning, after being at elevation for another day, it should bump up a bit. So I'm hoping to get high 80s, 90 before we move up any higher. But yeah, so.
Yeah, so one of the guides came up asking if we had any ibuprofen or aspirin. Why? Because one of the other guys was having a tooth problem of some kind, and nobody had any medical supplies. This is a problem. First, they Africa'd us on the contract. We were promised guides with a first aid kit and the skill to use it, and this was clearly not the case. Looks like I bought something that was not as advertised, which wasn't the first time and would not be the last. Classic Africa, or pretty much anywhere else, honestly.
Looks like Arizona.
I brought a book with me to read to, quote, while away the endless hours in camp, as my guidebook put it. But we barely had enough time to sleep. We definitely did not have any to lounge around and read.
This is day 3. We're on our way to the lava tower.
Second, what if there was an actual critical incident on the mountain? Would they have the tools and the training to properly respond? Probably not. Their answer to everything was drink tea. I flat out asked if they had a first aid kit of any kind, and they said no. I also kind of doubted their fieldcraft. I mean, they knew their way up the mountain, and had lots of language skills. But I couldn't say if there was anything else, at least at this time. I wonder if they even had a pulse ox, because I'd been using mine. Looked like my buddy and I had made the right call keeping an eye on our random guy. I mean, my buddy and I are both wilderness first responders. We both graduated from the National Outdoor Leadership School. He'd been an EMT and wilderness guide. I'd been a guide, been through a few SEER schools, had a Bachelor of Science in a related field. Am a community emergency response team instructor. I mean, we both brought our first aid kits, but they were our personal kits, not the ones we'd bring if we were leading a team. This is hail.
Snow! Snow time!
How you doing, guys?
Oh, is this a break?
Yeah, I just want to take a few minutes.
Okay.
So this is normal because of high elevation.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But later it will much better.
Thunder and tea on the side of Kilimanjaro. Halfway through day, what is this, 4? 3? 3. Cheers.
I launched the lava tower camp. And you know, even though we were going at a pace the guide set, we were routinely hours off our ETA. The lava tower is a 300-foot tall rock formation. It's pretty cool. But once we got to the lava tower, my buddy started sharing symptoms with the rando. Not good ones.
Everyone feels terrible.
I don't hope that you're recording.
We stayed for about an hour and then we pressed on. And after my buddy gave the guy the ibuprofen for his tooth, they were wanting the two of us to pass out our things to the random guy and anyone else. Now instead of 2 people having enough, no one really had enough. A few people just had a little bit more. Professional inefficiency really bothers me. I mean, they had a job, and it was in the contract. If we were supposed to bring our own kit, why wasn't it part of the gear check before we even left? What if my buddy and I had just been normal, unprepared goobers like the rando? Would we all have died? Maybe. Especially, later on.
I'm walking here.
Descending through the strange but beautiful Senecio? I don't know how to say it. It's a forest. It's got an altitude of like 13,000 feet. Then we camped at Barranco Camp. Now all of us were feeling kind of crappy, but just in different ways. My only real symptom was a perpetual shortness of breath, but I felt fine. My buddy seemed like he had been beat up, and the random seemed like he should have been under doctor supervision. We'd been moving constantly, and the pace was too fast without drugs. Diamox, I mean. Or some kind of prior acclimation. I just managed to practice my breathing exercises while my buddy tried to skip dinner and the random tried to get evacuated. My appetite was fine. Eventually, everyone was coaxed into joining the mess tent with me. But after dinner, the head guide came in and gave a talk about altitude sickness. He actually had a pulse ox and used it to check our oxygen percentage. We were all fine numbers-wise, which I'd known because I'd been using my pulse ox the whole time. But the guide did say my buddy and the rando were clearly suffering from altitude sickness. He then launched into the talk. Most people are familiar with the some version of the talk. The gist is that things don't always work out, not everything's for everyone, the world can be random, it's best of everyone's life if you just, call off whatever's going on. And I really thought that's where this was going, except at the end of the speech he did a 180 and he was like, I'm gonna do whatever I can to get you guys to the top, no matter what it takes. Which apparently what it took was taking my couple of pills of Diamox that were given to me by a Japanese guy on Aconcagua that I've been holding on to for a few years. He just gave them away to the group. Then he decided to take away one of our acclimation days. He's like, in my experience, the best way to make it if you feel bad is to run straight to the top and then back down as fast as you can so it doesn't catch up with you. This is the best way. I have many Diamox if there is a need. This is the trick. No worries. Hakuna Matata. Like, what? The trick is go as fast as you can and do all the drugs?
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's the best way? That's just like a Hollywood Tuesday.
Yes, science!
Yes, science!
Also, all my training and education begs to differ. And we'd paid for 7 days specifically for the acclimation. Now we were short a day, no refund. Classic. Also, if he had so much Diamox, why was he dispensing mine? I didn't even get told to take any because I was too fine. Apparently not breathing well isn't a problem. I mean, I didn't come this far to fail, so I was gonna triumph or die. I was in, no matter what, and my buddy begrudgingly agreed. I mean, the guides did have 12 years experience after all. They were very convincing. The random just really wanted to leave. So when I got up at 5 for exercises and 8, one of the guides and some porters broke off to take the random down. He was out, and he was right to do it. He shouldn't have even been there. This was the day my buddy and I pushed through 2 different camps and arrived at Barafu Base Camp to make our summit push. We began the day by descending into a ravine to the base of the Great Barranco Wall, and then we climbed the non-technical but steep, nearly 900-foot cliff. From the top of the Barranco Wall, we crossed a series of hills and valleys and then descended into the Caranga Valley. One more steep climb led us to Caranga Camp. And we left Caranga and hit the junction which connects with the Mueca Trail. We continued up to the rocky section to Barafu Hut. At this point, we had completed the southern circuit.
I'm gonna say it. I think I would have enjoyed this more with the rain than if we'd gone in the summertime. I think I like this better. Oh yeah, your umbrella. Yeah, we can see your umbrella.
We had an hour break before dinner, then a briefing, and then it was, quote, bed from 8 p.m. to 11 p.m. 3 hours that we did not sleep, and then off to the summit. I guarded my prized coconut in my sleeping bag so it wouldn't freeze. The lengths I go to for nonsense. You wind up leaving around 11, so you got plenty of daylight to get to the summit and back down in case people are moving slow. In our case, Slow doesn't even begin to describe it.
Look at that toilet.
The view from the tent.
Hey, you. $11 at night. Summit bid. Okay, it's a little after 11 p.m. on our final night. We're having one more cup of tea, and then it's off to the summit.
Indeed.
We were sluggish from the outset, and no small part from regular exhaustion. I mean, we'd condensed several days' progress into one and had practically no rest. We were literally falling asleep walking. I almost fell down several times to this. But when I brought it up to the guys, they were just like, "Pfft, that's mountains, you know?" Like, no, it's not. And they were like, "When the sun comes, you'll be awake." And I mean, they weren't wrong. We broke for tea on the side of the mountain and watched the sunrise, and I did feel myself become more conscious, but I wouldn't use the words awake or lucid, so much as now I was aware of just how bad off I'd gotten.
Whether you're in a university or the side of Everest, every place is the right place for tea time.
The numbness of my exhaustion had given way to the symptoms of altitude-related illnesses. Dizziness, nausea, a lot of difficulty breathing, brain fog, excessive muscular fatigue. So excessive that every couple of steps I'd have to stop and manually breathe to recover for the next few steps. Apparently, a lot of climbers refer to this as the Kili Shuffle. Improper acclimation effectively renders you a 150-year-old man. I mean, I presented well enough, which was better than my buddy was doing at this point. He was falling behind and hunched over on things for support, taking breaks. Of course, as the hours went on, he stabilized and fell into a groove. Pull, step, step, rest. Repeat. Once he got his cadence, our conditions flip-flopped, and I fell into a downward spiral, or more of a free fall. On top of my original symptoms, I had true difficulty getting any meaningful air into my body. The pressure behind my eyes was intense. It felt like I had a severe concussion while I was deep underwater. My pace had slowed to a shambling zombie crawl. At one end, my guide grabbed my trekking poles and pulled me along to get me to move faster. My oxygen was down to 70%. I vomited 3 or 4 times. I was symptomatic of both high-altitude pulmonary edema and high-altitude cerebral edema, and both can be deadly. They never gave me any Diamox. My buddy wasn't as bad off, but still not doing great. I mean, if this situation didn't warrant the Diamox, what did?
Yes, science!
Yes, science!
Now, I mean, I may have been a barely moving corpse, but I did never stop. A couple of times in the day when my buddy wasn't doing very good, he looked like he wanted permission to quit, but I wasn't gonna acknowledge that. They did ask him, and he said he could make it. Once I turned into a mindless husk, one of the guides told my buddy I looked like I was dead. They're like, "Do you think he'll quit?" My buddy was like, "Nash? Never." And that's right. When I say triumph or die, I mean it. But, I'd much prefer triumph. I was a little frustrated because I felt like some of their decisions were sabotaging our safety. I mean, if I was the guide and a client looked like I looked, I would call it off for sure. I'm glad they didn't. They were experts after all, I reasoned. I mean, they were trudging up the mountain same as us. They just happened to be better acclimated, so they weren't affected by the push. Hey, if they thought no Diamox and losing a day was best, who am I to argue? Turns out, an intelligent, educated, and experienced individual, because I later learned they'd been shotgunning Diamox the whole time. It took us 11 hours to complete a, quote, 7-hour climb. This time the pace difference was our fault, though. Mostly. A quick celebratory traditional coconut chop at the top and we were off.
Okay, it's Nash on the peak of Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania, East Africa. To celebrate the summit, going to do the traditional thing and chop a coconut in half. Ka! Ta-da! Victory! What's... Ka! Ta-da! Victory! What's Swahili for victory?
Shuja!
Shuja! Woohoo! All right. Thanks. We can feast later. Let's get out of here.
We made a hasty retreat down the mountain. We mostly just slid down the mountain the whole way. First on ice and snow, and then on endless slopes of scree. Every meter I dropped, I felt better and better until I felt 100% within an hour or two. We rested for a couple hours, then trudged through till we got to our final camp, which was in a floodplain, but thankfully it didn't rain much. My buddy and I had inflatable solar lanterns, and this guy really wanted one and said they couldn't get them, so I gave it to him. Because he asked for it. He asked if we could have it, and I gave it to him, and he seemed genuinely psyched, so why not? On the final day, we were told to get up at 5:30, but we got woken up at 5. Now I had to rush! If it was going to be 5, I would have got up at 4, so I didn't have to rush. And everything was wet from sleeping in the floodplain, and we still had a, quote, 6-hour hike. Although, this time we crushed it. We blasted that out in 3.5 hours. Not too long after that, we were taking a series of ridiculous pictures by the victory sign. I mean, in 2 days, we hiked 26K and lost a day we'd paid for. And probably a lot of brain cells from altitude illnesses, but we made it.
Perfect.
Hakuna Matata. Nash out.
Louisa.
Thank you for watching. Thanks.
Sounds like too much work.
You have wives?
No wives.
No. Right.
No wives.
Kids?
I hope not.
I slipped. Yes, on camera.
Ready? Good luck. Sorry you got sick.
While we were waiting for dinner one time, one of our guides came and said the stove was broken and asked if he could borrow my multi-tool to fix it. You know, the multi-tool that they had made fun of me for on the first day, because I had it and a flashlight on my belt as part of my everyday carry setup. They looked at it and they were like, "Hey, it looks like you came to Kili to kill someone." Like, come on. I wouldn't need this to do that. I let them borrow my multi-tool and they fixed the stove and we got dinner, but it was extremely late. But I started thinking, like, is this the first aid kit all over again? If I didn't have the tool, would there have been no dinner because they didn't have one? A lot of companies in Africa have been operating 10 or 20 or 30 years, but every day is like it's their first day working the kinks out. Come on. Am I wrong in thinking a decade is enough time to learn to get a tool in case something breaks? I mean, I know resources are scarce, but that's a long time.
Hey, we made it. Yeah, we summited Mount Kilimanjaro. Thanks to these guys. My name's Nash.
My name's George.
I was planning this trip for 1.5 years, and I roped him into doing it. And it got pretty bad, and it didn't look like he was gonna finish, and I didn't want to leave him behind.
Yeah.
And I got pretty bad, and they helped us finish.
Yeah.
They really pushed us. I've been on other guides, and I've been a guide, and they would have been within their rights to send us away, to cancel it. But they made sure that we summited safely, and thank you.
Yeah, they're great, absolutely great. So much experience, so much knowledge, and they really spend the time with us and talk to us, and it's great. And these guys are two great guys.
Woohoo! Thank you.
Nash out.